Hi, I'm Dahlia and this is Jerome, and today we're going to be talking to you about Bright Farms and their supply chain model and comparing it to that of a more traditional supply chain model. Jerome, can you tell us a little bit more about Bright Farms?
Yes, most definitely. So, what is Bright Farms? Let's start off with the mission first. The mission is to improve the health of society and the planet, and it's one of the most innovative ag startups according to Forbes. Going on with their partners with grocers such as Giant McCaffrey's Food Markets, Albertsons, Mariano's, Kroger, Metro Market, and others. And three main locations they have is Illinois, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. There's a reason why there's a lot of partnerships and locations that are on to come up, because there's going to be a way of innovation that's coming with Bright Farms. Oops. Alright, so let's go with the guide to hydroponic gardening. This is what Bright Farms is going to be using with their system of growing plants and produce. So what is hydroponics? Hydroponics is a method of organically growing plants without soil, providing all nutrients in the plant's water supply. Good things about the hydroponic system is that there's no weeds that are going to be produced to it, and it's going to be no pests that cannot harm the produce also. At the end of the day, and in long story short, it's a really good method that can grow higher crop yields. Okay. So traditional produce supply chain, we're talking about the supply chain with the traditional method of how produce will go in. So, Dahlia, would you want to go with it?
Yeah, I'll explain it. So basically, under the traditional supply chain, it starts at the farm in California where most produce is grown, and from there it's harvested and it's then loaded onto a truck, transported to a distribution center, and that is where it's going to be processed and packaged. Then it's loaded again into another truck and it's transported 28,000 miles from California to Pennsylvania, where it finally makes its way into the grocery store. And that entire process from the moment that it leaves the farm to when it finally reaches the consumer in the grocery store is about 6 to 7 days. So the food is traveling about a week before consumers are actually being able to buy their produce.
Yes, and when she's mentioning about 20,000 miles, it's pretty much the amount of time and days that it would take for a lot of shipments going in with the produce. But yes, 2,800 miles will travel by truck, which is an establishment of 6 to 7 days. So with Bright Farms' produce supply chain, it's much more simpler. We're going to give you an example of Rochelle, Illinois. It's grown through a hydroponic system at the Chicagoland greenhouse facility and distributed on the site of the hydroponic greenhouse, as well as transported exclusively to Mariano's Pick and Save and Metro Market, which after harvesting, it takes about 24 hours for it to reach to the stores. Alright, so the traditional versus Bright Farms case within the operational processes. We went over transportation, the oil and fuel with it, the amount of miles that it goes through, traveling from Fresno to Pennsylvania, the inventory and crop production, and infrastructure, but I would like to go more in depth with the labor, infrastructure, and the inventory. With the labor, it requires much more when it comes down to traditional farming. But with Bright Farms, you're going to have less labor, less workers. You're going to have less workers actually doing a bit more things, but it's going to be much more simpler to carry on with it when you're using the hydroponic system. With the inventory, it's not held in a warehouse like traditional crops. They're produced and immediately taken to the buyer. So that means that it's going to cut a step and make it much more faster, involving less steps. And with the infrastructure, they operate off a greenhouse system, which require buildings and space. On the contrary, traditional farming is outdoors, but requires packaging plants. So what this means is that they're going to just be based off of a greenhouse system, and you're not going to use a lot of, it's going to be much more smaller and more detailed oriented.
Can I add to what you said about the labor? So instead of
Yes.
having employees at the farm and at the distribution center and having people transporting and driving the trucks all the way to the grocery store, you have people in the greenhouse who are harvesting, who are able to package and process, and then who are able to actually transport it. So they're cross-trained and able to do all of these things in one place.
So, going more in detail with the forecasting inventory management, these are the key points that we have comparing the traditional versus the right forms. Produce packaging, lead time with food, local farmers, water supply, and quality management. All in all, what this really means is that you're going to have much more or less time with the food being produced after pretty much harvest and shipped to the stores within pretty much a day compared to 6 to 7 days. And that's going to just have much more of a less water supply that they're going to have to take in. We're trying to produce it. No pesticides. The management with the amount of quantity that they're going to have with the trucks, because you're not going to be carrying a whole truckload of plants. You're just going to grab enough produce for the certain specific supermarket, restaurant, or store that you're going to.
So this is a SWOT analysis that we did over Bright Farms and their supply chain, just to fairly kind of assess what comes with doing this sort of ag tech farming and the whole industry itself. So some of the strengths we identified with Bright Farms is that the food is a lot fresher. The process of using hydroponics is much more efficient, and it's also better for the environment. Weaknesses, there's the problem of the global greenhouse effect. You also don't get as much of a variety in foods, and also it is very expensive to just build the facility, the greenhouse itself. Opportunities, Bright Farms is offering a solution to the current food system, and along with that they're able to impact and influence future generations. So people are really able to understand what it means to eat locally from foods that are grown nearby within a 50-mile radius. Also, the ag tech industry, not just Bright Farms, is kind of bringing technology to a new platform by offering this concept of indoor farming, so you get a lot of room to innovate and constantly improve what is being used today. Some threats to mention: there are challenges such as the demand and the government approval, and also competition, which we will go into more depth later. So material benefits: obviously the food tastes better because they're using nutrients. It's a controlled environment, so the product is consistent all throughout. You get a higher yield, you're using less water, all of these things that we have mentioned thus far. Some disadvantages: right now Bright Farms is only growing some greens, herbs, and some tomatoes, so you don't get the wide variety of vegetables and fruits that you would get with the traditional model. As mentioned earlier, the high operating costs, it's very expensive. It's about $10 million just for the land acquisition and constructing the facility with all of the high-tech equipment, including lighting, heating, sensors, and other things to be able to harvest and grow crops indoors. The greenhouse gas issue, it's sort of a bit of a controversy, but the idea behind it is it's supposed to be more eco-friendly. However, it could also be more harmful in that the greenhouse is emitting gases that are harmful, that could be more harmful than transporting it from the farm to grocery stores thousands of miles away. So there are gaps within the model. These are just a couple of facility considerations that need to be evaluated first off, whether to build on an urban rooftop or whether to build in rural areas. Rural areas are good because the land is cheaper, you're able to find work, and you're also able to boost the economy if it's a pretty rundown area, if you're using a vacant lot. You can kind of invite more of a community there. Urban areas are a little bit more expensive because you need to acquire land, you need to get permits, and you need to get government approval, which could take months and months and months. Other things to mention when figuring out where to locate is proximity to other local farmers, and then also you need to check and see what sorts of access points you have for sewage lines, water, and other energy sources. So challenges I want to cover, consumer demand. As the population grows and expands, it's unsure whether Bright Farms will be able to keep up with the demand. They only have 4 locations now, so how fast can they expand and how well can they do that is a question that they must answer. Competition, other companies who are trying and using the same indoor farming methods, they're going to need to compete and really market themselves in a way that people will want to buy from Bright Farms. So this is kind of just a cost analysis, a financial worksheet over the Bright Farms. I'll let you kind of look over it line item by line item. These are just, it's a very rough estimate of what we expected the monthly expenses to be, about $26,000 compared to this $40,000. And although that seems significantly less, the costs to construct are still $10 million, which is a lot of money. So, with that said,
let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food.
And with that, we just want to say that although the ag tech industry is new, we think that Bright Farms really has a good foothold in kind of leading the way of what it means to eat local, have better food, and you know, really grow the idea of indoor farming for a more sustainable future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is it.